Hey everybody, Jared here with Yellow Van Handyman. I'm repairing another washing machine for you today. Today's fun because I have a bunch of students that I'm going to show how to do this. This is our support team training, and so we're going to take this machine apart, show you how to repair it, and put it all back together. The reason that I started creating these videos is because there's pretty much one problem with these front load washing machines, and for the most part one only. Some of them will have door switch issues, but for the most part, the biggest problem is the bearing and seal on the back of the tub. And the problem with it is not so much that it goes bad, it's going to happen, but that the manufacturers do not provide the parts in a cost-effective way to be able to make the repair yourself. So I put together some repair kits. They're only $80 including shipping, and we ship them out like next day. We're shipping these things every day to get these machines repaired quickly because, like me, laundry piles up and we know you got to get it done. So we're going to go through this repair. We're going to show you exactly how to do it. This particular machine is a Whirlpool. Yours could also be a GE, Electrolux, or a Kenmore, and still have, or a Frigidaire, and still have the same design. So we're going to go through this one. We've also got probably about 9 or 10 other videos with different types of machines that I've repaired to show you how to do the repairs. If your machine is making noise, if it's making clunking, if it sounds like a jet airplane, or if it kind of has a whining to it when it's spinning, especially when it's spinning on high, then most likely the seal has failed and your bearings have gotten wet and they need to be replaced. So the failure is the seal allowing water through, and the bearings, they can't operate unless they're in grease, and when they get wet they get rusty and they start breaking apart, and so they end up starting to make noise. So we're going to go through the repair and then we'll wrap it up at the end. First thing we're going to do is take the top cover off, but before we do that I want to show you some of the tools that I use. My favorite is a cordless. This happens to be a impact driver, and I'm using a 1/4 inch nut driver that goes into that. Now if you don't have one of these screw guns or impact guns, then you can also use like a regular nut driver. This one happens to be a ratcheting nut driver, so you can change out the tips on it, and you can unscrew the screws pretty easily. There's also manual nut drivers that are really inexpensive, and for the most part most of the screws are going to be 1/4 inch, and so I like having the nut driver tip. This particular machine is also going to use a T20 Torx drive, and so that's like a 5-6 tip Torx tip, and T20 is the size that you need. And I've put that into an adapter here so that I can plug that into my gun as well when I want to take screws in and out. Okay, we're just gonna keep going around this. You'll notice I'm skipping some of the screws that don't actually hold the back on, because there's some heavy metal supports underneath that, and you don't want those to fall off while you're taking the back off. Now, I would use a big socket, but I know that some of you watching may not have a socket, so I'm just using a crescent wrench to show you. You don't have to have a fancy socket and air gun to take this off. So you use the screwdriver to keep the pulley from turning while you loosen the nut, and then just unscrew the nut. And then try just rocking the pulley back and forth like this to see if you can, while you're pulling towards you, to see if you can get it to walk off the shaft, which this one is coming off easily. If you have more trouble than that, you can stick some flat screwdrivers or pry bars and just kind of rock it back and forth to pull it off of the shaft. This is a pretty soft pulley, and so you have to be careful not to damage the surface in here where it goes around the shaft, because you want that to be snug. And if your machine will turn, this one won't, you can spin this and slide the belt off before you do that. It'll make it a little bit easier to take the pulley off. So we're going to go ahead and take these supports off of the back here. Once you get the screws out, lift up on them and pull back. All right, now we're gonna go pull the motor off. I have a 13mm socket here. I'm just gonna pull this off. You rotate this down, and then you're gonna pull it towards you, and it will slide right out. Once you get the motor to drop down, you need to disconnect the connector.
Disconnect the connector?
Yeah. There's also a ground connector you need to pull off. There's 2 of them on this model. Those are off. And then, oh, we've got actually 3 on this model. This wire right here that I just unplugged from the motor connects to the front housing or to the metal housing. And then if you follow that wire up, it also connects to this center part. So the reason that they do that is they're actually trying to save the bearing life, because what happens here is this is completely isolated from the rest of the machine, because this is it's all mounted in plastic, and so there's no way for the electrical current to travel from this metal to the housing except through the water that's in the tub. And so a few years ago they started adding this wire, because what was happening is they were getting electrolysis through the water, and it was causing damage to the shaft and the bearing and the seals. And it's essentially a flow of electricity that's going through the water, and you don't want that. So that's why they're grounding these now. All right, on this particular model, the counterweight's really easy to get to, so I'm just going to go ahead and pull it off so that it's out of the way, and it also makes the assembly lighter. So to do that, you just pull these 3 screws off here. Make sure you hold it too so it doesn't drop. You don't want this thing to break. We're going to pull the vent line off here, and these clamps, if you have a pair of pliers, or these are some fancy channel locks that I really like, you just clamp those together and walk it off, and just leave those clamps in place, and it'll make it easier to do the reassembly. Okay, this is the first time we're going to use the T20 Torx bit on this project. We're going to take 1 screw out here in the back to pull this assembly off, and just kind of walk this out. It's got a little O-ring that sticks into the bottom of the tub. All right, we'll set that aside. Okay, we're going to pull this back assembly off just to get it out of the way. And I disconnected this hose and these 2 wires that plug in right here. You just pull these little levers back, and those wires slide right out. Slide this clamp back, and this hose will slide right out of there. Just to make it a little bit easier to fold this assembly out of the way, I'm going to unhook these. The best way to do that is to use a pair of pliers or dikes. And if you look, you see how this thing, I'll turn it a little bit there. So all you do is press that together gently, and then push it down through there, and it disconnects it. You don't want to cut it, because you want to be able to use it to put this back together. And then I'm going to disconnect this white and yellow connector on this end. So to get these off, you just want to pry this little tab up. There we go. Pink wire we're going to take off here. All right. Okay, next we're going to pull the main drain water pump tube off. And again, this is one of those clamps. This one's a pretty heavy duty one. And you just clamp it like this, drop it down, and then this will pop right off. And there'll be some water in there, but not too much. Okay, next thing we're going to do is take the pump out, the water pump. And the water pump doesn't actually have any fasteners that you have to unscrew. So you can pop this little cover up, and then we're going to pull this connector off to disconnect the power. And then if you look at the bottom, there's this rubber plate here. You just take a screwdriver and pry under that and pry it up, And see how it pops up like that? You gotta get it all the way up, all the way across. And then once that's up, you just push the motor towards it like that, and the motor will come right out. So I'm going to show you how to get these shocks off without breaking them. All you do is rotate it 90 degrees, but before you do that, you have to push in on these. So you take a little jeweler's screwdriver and push in on that and push that tab like that. The problem is that you can see this one pretty easily, but there's also one on the back side. So you have to do them both. So you have to get a little screwdriver in on both of them, kind of like that, and then push these both down and rotate it at the same time. So it's a little bit of a, and then just fold that down and let it sit there. It'll be fine. Okay, so the ground wire I was talking about earlier that goes around to the back, I went ahead and unscrewed that and peeled it off all the way up to here. And we're also going to disconnect all of these wires from here, noting where they connect. So this green and yellow one went in the bottom center, and each of these pink ones connects to this unit here. One of them is going to be a little bit longer in the wire harness, so you'll know which one it connects to. And then we're going to disconnect this connector as well. So that pulls those all off. And then remember how I showed you how to get these off earlier. We're going to take the feed tube that sends your washing machine detergent and stuff from this unit into the tub. And this is really easy, requires no tools other than your hand. You just pinch this rubber thing and pull it. Let's go ahead and open the door. And there will be 2 screws, 1/4-inch screws, take off. Don't worry about the door dropping because it won't. And then once you get those off, just lift the door up and it'll come right off. Once you get the door off, you can pull this front door seal off. And if you pull this back a little bit, you'll see that there's a little metal ring right there. And if you go all the way to the bottom, you'll see that there's a spring that connects it all. And you just grab a hold of that. And you can also use needle nose pliers or regular pliers or a screwdriver or something. You just grab a hold of that and then just gently pull it, and it comes off all the way around just like that. Sometimes they'll put a little dab of adhesive underneath here, so just watch for that. Now, a little free tip consequently with this door seal is if you ever have a bad door switch on this, which is this unit right here, all you do is pull this door seal, pull that spring off, and then you can reach in here. You can take these 2 screws out. You pull the door switch this way, you slide it out over here. There's a couple of wires that connect to it. You can change it, put it back in, put the door seal back on. It's a very easy repair that you can do yourself. That's pretty much the only other thing that goes wrong with these machines for the most part. Okay, now that the door seal's off, we're in the back of the machine now, but we're pretty much ready to take the tub out of the unit. So if you're by yourself, then one of the ways I've done this is you can put a strap around it and hook it up to, like, you know, your something on the ceiling or something like that. If you're pretty strong, you can do it by yourself. You have to lift the assembly one side at a time and unhook the springs. Anything that's about 7 or 8 inches tall, you can put it underneath. So the thing's just sitting there floating, but I have it setting, the weight is on this. Part of the reason is, you know, you have this control mechanism down here, you have some wiring, you have the shock sitting there. You don't want the thing just to drop and maybe damage something as you're taking the top springs off. Okay, so we're gonna pull the assembly out. The only thing that's holding it in place right now is the 2 top springs. Those are the very last things that you take off. So you can see it's kind of floating there. I have the little support underneath it to support the weight of the tub. If you're by yourself and you want to be really careful, you can unscrew this front counterweight. There's 3 screws, they're 13mm bolts. You can come through the front door opening and you can take those off. What I do is I get to one side of the machine like I am now. I'm going to reach through the front, on the front of the counterweight, and grab that, and then get a hold of something on the back here. And I'm just going to lift up, and if you watch that spring, it just unhooked itself. And so now the spring, there's one of the main springs, so now it's only hanging on one spring. Same thing, this one's a little more difficult because this filler thing is in the way, or the detergent thing. So I'm going to lift it up. You can leave the springs there, but sometimes they end up getting hooked up on something and they end up causing problems. And so now basically you're just going to roll the thing out the back, and it's pretty heavy, so don't let it drop. You don't want to break anything. Okay, this particular assembly has clips holding it together, and all you do is take like a flat screwdriver and pry these off. I got all the clips off, and so we want to part the tub in half now. You just want to be careful when you're doing this because you don't want to damage the seal or the surfaces. This one is coming apart pretty easily. You got to pop these tabs in a little bit so that they'll clear like that. All right, and the drum comes out with it. Once you have this parted, this is pretty much the part of the project that we get the most questions or challenges about, and it has to do with getting this shaft out. So we have half of the tub assembly. This is the back half of the tub assembly. Inside of this back half is where the bearings and the seal are set. But right now, this drum assembly, which spins inside of these, has a shaft that goes through this back half, goes through the seal, through the bearings, and out the back, and that's where your pulley hooks up, where we put this nut on the back. So we have to get this shaft to come out of the back half of the tub. The very best way to do this, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but the way that has worked really well for me many times in the past is just to have, if you have a concrete floor, make sure that the threads on the shaft are protected, as we did here with screwing this nut on, and then just rotate this up. Don't put a block of wood in there because that'll create bounce. You just want to lift it a little bit by the plastic tub, lift it off the concrete, just start with like an inch up and drop it. That one sounded very solid, which is not good news. And then just increase the distance between the ground and the shaft each time until it pops out. That sounded better. So it's out. We had to lift it almost a foot. And you got to take the nut off of it for it to be able to come out the rest of the way. And then you can pull it out. So there's your shaft. This surface right here where there's some rust, and this surface right here, that's where your bearing sits. Those are where your two bearings sat. And this surface right here is where your seal is riding. So the water is on that side of the seal. The bearings are on this side of the seal, and the seal failed, allowing water to come into this to these bearings. You can see the seal here. There's a portion of it that's actually broken off. So the rubber is degraded to the point where it's coming apart. You can see the bearings. They're not spinning smoothly. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's just really, really rough. So there's a couple different ways to get the seal out. It usually does not take very much pressure, but if you just have a regular screwdriver, you can put like a block of wood here and you can pull up on it, get underneath it and pull up. I've also got a pry bar that's got a kind of a T handle on it, so it makes it much easier. So you just got to get underneath the edge of the seal here. There we go. All right, there's the old seal. This is the bad part of it. These are the lips that seal around the shaft, and that's what failed and allowed the water in. So you see how we have a little bit of space here. There's the bearing on the outside that we need to pound out. We're going to pound it out from the other side. So we really need something to space this off, like a couple blocks of wood, or if you have something round that you can set in there, like the go-kart tire I showed you earlier, that's a perfect option. So find something to set it on. So if you look at these bearings, they're terrible. This is the reason why it wasn't turning. So you can see this, it won't even rotate. So we'll set those aside, and then we'll compare these to the repair kit that you're going to get in the mail, and I'll show you how to do that to make sure you have the right parts. So the reason that I've set this tub up on a bucket is because you have all these tabs underneath here that you don't want to break off, and this is also your sealing surface when it seals to the other half of the tub, and you don't want to damage that. Sometimes the bucket won't work because it has too much bounce, but we'll try it and see, and if it doesn't work, we'll use another method. You just have to find something that you can support the tub with that will reduce the bounce. And you can just put some 2x4s underneath this surface and set it down. You just want to make sure you don't damage these tabs. Not very much. That one was pretty easy. So this is the old seal, so we'll start with that. The new seal looks different, but when you look at the diameter, the outside diameter matches. When you look at the inside diameter matches. Now, another thing that you can do is you can go ahead and grab the shaft, and this seal is going to slide over the shaft and set on that surface. And so you want it to be nice and snug. It should turn, but it should be snug. Okay, because that is 100% of your sealing surface right there. So this surface you want to make sure is good and clean, and there's no scratches going this way. If it's got little scratches going this way, it's not that big a deal, but you definitely don't want any grooves in it or scratches going this way, because that's going to allow the water to get through there. So this seal, that's where it's going to live its life, right there, and it looks very happy to me. The bearings are a little more straightforward. So you can stack them on top of each other. The outside's easy to tell. Look through the inside, you can see that they're the same diameter on both the inside and the outside. So the large bearing is fine. The small bearing matches as well. So when you look at this, see how easily this turns? On the inside, it just barely a touch of my finger. This one won't turn at all. It's completely locked up. And you see all these balls in here? There's some missing balls. If you pulled this black seal off here, you'd see a nice ring of balls and a bunch of grease in there, which enables that bearing to work. This one's nice, that one's new. This was the old one. Now it turns, but it's a little rough. You can feel that it's rough as compared to this one. But this was the real failure, which was caused by a bad seal. So we know we got the right parts, so now we have reached the halfway point with this repair, and there's nothing any harder than what you've experienced already. It's just a matter of reversing all the steps and putting it back together. Sometimes getting the shaft out is a little bit difficult, but you saw how I was lifting it up. I drop it on the concrete, make sure the threads on the shaft are protected. Just keep going higher. Once you get up to about a foot, just keep doing it at that height until the thing pops. It'll pop. If you want to let it sit under penetrating oil overnight, you can do that, but it'll come out. It's made to come out. So now we're going to go ahead and put these back in, and we're going to use our old bearings as a tool to help us do that. It's important when you set these bearings in place that they get all the way seated. And so if you look down in here, there's a shoulder inside of this, and the bearing needs to go all the way down until it touches that. When you're installing it, you'll hear the difference when you pound on it. It kind of has a dead sound or a thud sound once it gets all the way down in there. This is an interference fit. Bearings are designed to fit tight. So I'm going to put it in there flat. I'm going to put a piece of wood over it because I want to distribute my pressure straight, and I want the pressure to be on this outside race. I don't want to pound on the inside race because then I'm transferring that weight between the balls to the outside race. So I want to pound on the outside of it and put it in nice and straight. Now once you get to that point, there's still probably ½ an inch that it needs to go in. And so you could use the old bearing if you want to get it in. If you go too far, you may end up having troubles getting the old bearing out, so you got to be careful about that. You can also use a socket. The problem with a socket is most people probably aren't going to have a socket that's that big. But there you have it. You don't even need the wood really on this. Hear the difference? How it kind of gets that thud and it starts bouncing. So the key when you're setting the bearings is you want to pound on the outside of that race for whichever one it is. Another thing that you can do is if you have a piece of wood like this, you can just cut this wood, just cut a little slice so that it fits, and then stick it on there like that, and then just pound it in straight in like that. That's fine too. But you just want to try to put the pressure on the outside of that. Okay, we're going to set the inner bearing, and we're going to pretty much do it the same way as the outer, but I'll just tell you right now that this one is harder. And the reason is because you have this distance right here, and the typical hammer handle is longer than what you need to pound, and so you're like, it's just kind of a pain. So we'll go ahead and set this bearing to start this one, just because I want to be able to feel and make sure it's nice and straight. Okay, so I have it in fairly flush there. Now I just happen to have a pipe that is, I know you're laughing when I say that, but I really did just happen to have this pipe that fits perfectly to the outside race, so I'm going to pound it in the rest of the way. Some of you are probably saying, the bearing won't go in all the way. Again, you might have the old race stuck in there, so you need to always check for that. The next thing is we want to set the seal. And you can see there's a shoulder right there. So the seal is only going to go in until it hits that shoulder, and so there's going to be a little bit of a gap between it and the bearing. What I want to do is I want to put some silicone around the outside of this, because I want that outside of the seal to be held in place, and I don't want it to leak, but it's a safety precaution, because this is the reason why you're doing this repair, because your seal failed. So again, you want to try to spread the weight out to pound this seal in place. Try to keep it as straight as possible as you're going down. It's all the way in. So we're good to go. It's nice and sealed up around the outside edge. So the drum assembly is ready to go down through the tub. So this is the back half of the tub. This is going to be where the small bearing rides. This is going to be where the large bearing rides. This is going to be where the seal rides. We've already checked all these, slid the seal over it, it was tight, slid the bearing over that, it was a good fit, slid the other bearing over this, it was a good fit, cleaned up these surfaces. So let's go ahead and assemble this. If you're by yourself. I guess if you're by yourself, you don't have any help. All right, you can rotate it, put some pressure on. There, it's seated. This is the top of the assembly. So water is obviously going to potentially leak on the bottom, right? So what I do is I go around and check this tub seal just with my fingers to make sure it's good. So I'm just going to go around this lower half, and I'm going to add some insurance. And I'm just going to put a little bit of this black silicone on here. Again, you don't have to do this. It's a pressure seal, so it's not vital, but to me this job is difficult enough to do that I would just like to have a little bit of insurance. All right, so now you know how to do it. It's not that tough. Take your laptop into your garage or into your laundry room or wherever you're making the repair. Click through the video as you need to, follow the steps. The link to order a repair kit is below the video. Again, it's only 80 bucks to order a repair kit, free shipping. We also have a chat forum that you can dive into and ask questions. Make sure you post pictures if you have any issues. We're on that constantly. Answering questions and making sure people have the parts they need and the support they need. Hopefully we've highlighted the difficult things through this to show you exactly how to deal with those as you're going. And again, there's other videos that you can watch that'll also demonstrate the repair for different types of models and things like that. And finally, of course, you can always call us. We have a great support team that'll help you answer questions, and there's lots of other people on our chat forum that have made the repair that are really helpful in making sure that you get your questions answered and things like that. We work really hard to get the kits out quickly. Most of the time we send the kits out the same day that they're ordered. Look forward to hearing your questions and your success stories.